안녕하세요. For your information, I'm not Korean. I'm from Malaysia. Malaysia is part of Southeast Asia. And my goal today is to get every one of y'all to either consider expanding your business or your coverage to Southeast Asia, or immediately after this, you start thinking about like plans to expand your business there. Okay? So hopefully you guys will find this session useful. If there's any questions at all, please stop me, or you can leave it to the end of the presentation to ask me any questions. Okay? So before I start, I know it's late, it's 7 p.m. You guys had a long week. Well, you guys had a long day. It's only Monday. Who here likes soju? No, you don't? Okay. So I'm going to start off with 3 questions, Q&A, trivia. And the person who raises his hand the fastest and give me the correct answer will win a bottle of soju from me. Okay? I'm not kidding. I actually bought sojus from the convenience store nearby. Okay? So let's test out your knowledge on Southeast Asia. So the numbers are, okay, so first of all, you cannot use Naver, you cannot use Google, okay? So based on trust system. So I'm going to give you a multiple choice, and the fastest person to raise up his hand or her hand and give me the correct answer will win, okay? So which one is it? Population of Southeast Asia. 600 million, correct. Woohoo! Bottle of soju. Okay, I have 2 more. Don't worry. Slightly tougher one. Okay. How many islands are there in Southeast Asia? Yes. More than 25,000. Wow. Woohoo! It's amazing, isn't it? Like, who here knows how many islands there are in Korea? I don't know myself, so I have to Google it. But I don't think it's as much as many as 25,000. So it's amazing, right? I mean, Southeast Asia, a continent of like 10 countries, well, not really a continent, a sub-region of 10 countries has over 25,000 islands, okay? And lastly, okay, mobile connection as a percentage of the population. So you know the population of Southeast Asia, right, is above 600 million. How many mobile connections, means active mobile connections, okay? Not necessarily smartphone connections, but mobile connections there are as a percentage of the population. Think about it, 600 million people, okay? Active mobile connections. You got to put up your hand. Okay. Wow. So you guys know so much about Southeast Asia. My presentation is done. Congratulations. Okay, we celebrate after this, okay? Cool. So you guys know that Southeast Asia as a sub-region is huge, okay? It's very dispersed in terms of its geography, has a lot of different islands, but it's very much connected right now, right? By the virtue fact that, what we have in our pockets, the mobile phone. Okay, so just to give you a background, so for those who don't know where Southeast Asia is, it's about 4 to 7 hours away from Korea. And we are roughly on the same time zone. So that's perfect for expansion, right? And Southeast Asia as a sub-region, okay, it's very much bounded by this association called ASEAN, right? So ASEAN has 10 members, and so I'm not going to get you guys to guess, and I have no more soju, okay? But the majority of the largest economies are the likes of Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. There are others which are smaller in terms of economy size and smaller in terms of population, with the likes of Brunei, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos, right? So it has 10 members, and it's a very close-knitted pact, right? We get together like at least once a year. We talk about trade, we talk about connectivity, we talk about all sorts of like economic driving or social driving initiatives amongst the members. So it's very much a close-knitted economy, okay? But there are some challenges which I will explain to you later on. So 10 members, and you guys know this, over 25,000 islands. So it's very much, half of it is like an archipelago, okay? A constellation of different islands. And if Southeast Asia was a country, it would be the third largest in the world, right? Who here knows the first and the second? India and China are correct. So if you group up like Southeast Asia together, it will be the third largest country in the world, okay? And if Southeast Asia is an economy, right, it will be the sixth largest in the world, 2.4 trillion. And bear in mind, aside from Singapore, none of the other countries here are considered developed. And Singapore has a population of 6 million only, right? So if you group up everything together as an economy, 2.4 trillion a year in terms of GDP, right? Sixth largest in the world. And like I mentioned just now, there is a lot of like a fluid trade between the countries, right? So, there's tax exemption. When we sort of like sell items to Thailand and vice versa, there is very little tariff. So there's very little barrier preventing like the countries to sell to each other, right? But we as a region, we also have a lot of free trade agreements with China. We have free trade agreements with Australia, with Japan, and Korea as well, okay? We almost had a pact with the United States until Donald J. Trump took over. Yeah, so we were working on it for the past few years. Barack Obama was very supportive of this region. It's called the TPP, Trans-Pan-Pacific. But after Donald Trump took over, he sort of like threw it in the rubbish bin. Okay, so aside from like US, free trade fluidity is very much present in Southeast Asia, and it's very well connected. So I'm sure you guys know of AirAsia. So AirAsia is a regional company. It's not so much a Malaysian company. And AirAsia serves about 50 million passengers a year. Majority of them is within Asia and within Southeast Asia, right? So connectivity in terms of like the physical sense, highways, so on and so forth, is very much a pact that the ASEAN members agree upon, okay? But today, I'll focus on the Southeast Asia 6. And these 6 countries that I mentioned to you just now, right, has over 90% of the population of Southeast Asia and drives over 95% of the GDP, right? So to give you a scale as to how many people live in these 6 countries, Singapore is obviously the smallest, right? You guys know that Singapore is a tiny country state. Thailand is almost 70 million. Vietnam and Philippines, so this is Vietnam, this is Philippines, close to 100 million. Malaysia, my country, is 31 million. And the biggest, obviously, is Indonesia at 260 million, okay? But, like a lot of when I speak about Southeast Asia, I speak about the amazing opportunity and the awesome sort of like headroom that Southeast Asia presents to the worldwide economies or the worldwide audience and startups, right? Is that why Southeast Asia and not China and not India? Isn't it easier because it's one country, technically one language. India is not really one language, it's very complicated. And it's just, it's not separated by sea, right? It doesn't have like over 25,000 islands. Let's take a step back, right, and look at Asia Pacific as a whole. Asia Pacific houses 60% of the population. But let me use like B2C e-commerce as a yardstick, right? 60% of the population live in Asia. And Asia drives 40% of the GMV, right? So it's huge. You think about it, like most countries in Asia, when it comes to the digital space, when it comes to the internet economy, it's fairly young compared to Europe, compared to the US, right? So this is obviously driven by, you guys know this, it's driven by Korea, it's driven by, majority of it is China, Japan is pretty huge as well, Australia is very saturated, and the amount of like money that is spent online, e-commerce, Australia is huge. India is becoming ever increasingly large, right, in terms of the digital spends by its consumer. I didn't put Korea here because you guys are Koreans. You guys should know the number, and I don't want to put false information. But I've checked it with like World Bank, Wikipedia. So hopefully it's accurate. So if you look at all these countries, right, huge, and people know that in China, huge competition, government regulation, large players. India, very complex as well. Japan, very saturated. Australia, very saturated. So where's the next frontier? Southeast Asia. Woo! So you look at, in terms of the e-commerce size, right? Okay? Across the whole of Asia Pacific, ASEAN as a region, 600 million in population, right? Half of that of India is only driving 6 billion in e-commerce GMV a year, okay? That's extremely low. And if you look at like the internet population, 260 million, right? And the digital buyer is 1/3 of that, right? How can this number be so low? Okay? I'll explain why later, but the point of this slide is that it presents huge opportunity, okay? Huge opportunity for you, startups, investors, to really think about Southeast Asia as your next frontier, okay? And if I look at the connectivity in terms of the internet population, right? Southeast Asia, the C6 at the moment, has 260 million people accessing the internet. And this is growing 14% year on year. So the global population is 3.4 billion, and it's growing at 10% year on year, driven predominantly by the emerging markets, the BRIM markets. And what our study did, Temasek and Google, so Temasek is the largest investor in like the digital space. They had a joint study with us, and they projected that in 5 years, okay, the internet users in Southeast Asia is going to double to about 500 million, okay? And majority of the people who are accessing the internet, it's through their smartphones, okay? They may or may not have a 3G connectivity. They may or may not have 4G connectivity, okay? Vietnam, for example, a lot of the consumers are accessing the internet through Wi-Fi, right? Similarly, like Korea, Wi-Fi coverage in Vietnam is huge, right? You go to any cafes, you go to any restaurants, there's always Wi-Fi connectivity, right? But the thing here is that because of the income level, because of GDP per capita, naturally, a lot of people can't really afford like the latest iPhone or the Android Pixel, and they buy phones or devices to access the internet that is generally less than $150, okay? So, the Chinese manufacturers are very, very popular in Southeast Asia. Huawei, Oppo, OnePlus, all these guys are making a killing in Southeast Asia, right? And once they have access, Southeast Asians are known to spend a lot of time on their phones, and they spend a lot of time on social media. Facebook once released a global stat on the amount of time per person, okay, spent on Facebook. Malaysia is #1 in the world, right? So they spend, I don't know whether it's productive or not. I personally don't spend my time on Facebook, okay? But my countrymen do spend a lot of time on Facebook. And if you look at like the top right, average number of IM apps. IM is instant messaging, right? So the popular ones in Korea is what? Line, Kakao, right? In these countries, like Indonesia, for example, #1 is not WhatsApp. #1 used to be BlackBerry, right? Malaysia is WhatsApp. Thailand is Line. Vietnam is WeChat, right? And they also use, Facebook Messenger. They use Hangouts, hopefully, Google Hangouts, and they use WhatsApp, right? So it's an ever-changing landscape, and there's no one clear winner there. Hence, people are still using multiple forms of communication on their phones, right? And speaking about like spending a lot of time on phones, majority of that is driven by gaming, right? So gaming in Southeast Asia is huge. It's very addictive, and I'll tell you why in a bit, right? And lastly, iFlix subscribers. So who here knows about Netflix? Who here knows about iFlix? Good, good. iFlix is not the cheap version of Netflix. iFlix is the emerging market version of Netflix, okay? And the most popular category on iFlix is Korean dramas, right? And Netflix and iFlix has launched in almost 20 countries, right? So they won't target Korea, they won't target Japan, they won't target like US and the UK. They target places like Brazil, like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, India, Africa, so on and so forth. It has, at the moment, after 3 years of opening up in Malaysia as a headquarters, 5 million subs. So that's amazing. I'll talk more about iFlix later on as a case study. Okay? And I spoke about gaming, why gaming is so popular. Okay? One of the reasons is this. Okay? Aside from Singapore, so this one tells you the age profile of the Southeast Asian population, right? Majority of them, or over 70% of them, less than 34 years old. And we know that if the population is young, right, the likelihood of them using a digital platform is very high. The propensity for them to sort of like, spend more, lifetime value, right, of your product is very high. And generally what this means is that the income per capita spent on digital products is generally very high as well, okay? If you look at gaming, gaming is so huge. I would say there's a direct correlation between the age and the fact that gaming is big, right, in Southeast Asia. So over 70% of the population younger than 34 years old, okay? And also the fertility rate. So you think about, so I had a conversation with Jeffrey, who runs Campus Seoul. Fertility rate in Korea, fertility rate in Singapore, very much similar. It's very low. People are not like giving birth, okay? But places like Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, no problems. A lot of people are producing a lot. Really, they are producing a lot. Malaysia, for example, 2 years ago, 29 million population. Today it's 31, right? It grows very fast. We're running out of space. Okay. Cross-border commerce as well. So, so this particular chart, right, I look at search queries, Google search queries, okay? And Google is, as a search engine, is #1 in all these markets. Naver is nowhere to be found. There is 1% on Yahoo and point-something% on Bing, right? So I use search queries, and what I do is I look at people in Indonesia, okay, the type of products that they search for. And I zoom it down to, let's say, products from China, okay? So one search query would be cheap clothing from China. And we see more and more Indonesians searching for such products from the mainland China, okay? Singapore, they love Japanese items, right? So they are searching for it. So what this tells me is that there is a lot of like purchase intent. Not so much purchase already, but purchase intent for products made in these countries. By Singaporeans, by Indonesians. Korean products, you must be wondering, okay, is it popular or not? The answer is yes. Malaysians love Korean products. Filipinos love Korean products. Indonesians love Korean products. And I'll show you why later on. 64% year-on-year growth for Korean products in Malaysia. And the popularity of Korean products is not recent. It's not like it happened last year. For the longest time, right, people have been like wanting more and more Korean exports, okay? One example would be, and using this insight, so who here is familiar with 11th Street? I'm sure all of you all are, right? #1 e-commerce marketplace in Korea. So they expanded into Malaysia about 2.5 years ago, okay? I work with them very, very closely. So I'm here to also, meet up with some of them. And what they noticed is that, hey, like Malaysians, they are looking for Korean products. They love made in Korea. They love the beauty products. They love fashion, so on and so forth. Even like a tablecloth made in Korea is is of premium perception, right, in Malaysia. So what they did was, in their e-commerce marketplace, they created a section called Korean Street, right, 11th Street and Korean Street, and business is buzzing, right? Right now, it's the fasting period for Muslim people around the world. Malaysia is a majority Muslim, and we see a lot of purchases for fashion made in Korea in time for their big celebration in 2 weeks' time, right? So it's amazing. It's amazing how Korean products, Korean categories are influencing, Southeast Asian people and influencing our festivities, right? So here, so you talk about like digital buyers, right? That 88 million out of Southeast Asia. We can see that those digital buyers are very savvy, right? These guys, they buy from all over the world, right? They're willing to buy because Southeast Asia has a lot of like maybe limitations in terms of a variety of products. So they do look at America, where the latest sort of like Google Home comes from. They look at China, for example, because it's cheap. Thai consumers look at like Japan, right? Because they love Japanese items. But you notice that Korea features there as well. So these guys, like these Southeast Asian consumers, they are used to buying stuff overseas, right? But I can tell you the volume is not huge. The volume is not huge because shipping cost is a barrier. So once they, you take Malaysian consumers, for example, once they have purchased like items from China, when it comes to Malaysia, it's almost the same price as when you buy from the market, right? So it's not like, how do I say this? It's not a very compelling reason for them to buy because of like the high cost. But they buy it because it's a novelty item, and because it's first, they're the first people to actually, get hold of it, right? Bottom line is, the behavior is there for digital buyers in Southeast Asia, right? And we spoke about Korean women fashion. So I work with, this 2 weeks here, I'm working with this startup called Zigzag. So you guys know of Zigzag, right? So they get items from Dongdaemun Market and they sell it to Koreans. So they are thinking about expanding outside of Korea, right? So I did this analysis for them. I look at Korean women fashion, okay? Is it popular outside of Korea? I don't know whether it's a yes or no, but in Philippines alone, there are over 2 million searches for Korean women fashion, right? A year. So it's huge, right? I mean, you think about like people who go to Google in Philippines, right? They type in Korean women fashion, buy Korean women fashion online, so on and so forth. 2 million of them a year. And this number, I believe, will increase over time, right? And as you guys know, this is Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, right? So it's a fairly new city, and they are only maybe last year there is McDonald's in Ho Chi Minh City, only last year. But you look at the number of like Korean restaurants there are in Ho Chi Minh City, right? So I'm amazed, and I meet a lot of Koreans who are based there, right? So this tells you the popularity of even like the Korean food in Southeast Asia. Okay, and I want to showcase to you Korean entertainment and why is it so popular. Okay, who here knows Lee Min Ho? Yeah. Okay. By the way, these guys, you see the crowd there, it's not 11th Street. No one knows what 11th Street is back then, when 11th Street launched. Everyone was there for Lee Min Ho, right? And none of them are Korean. All of them are Malaysian, okay?
Are you guys all ready to meet Lee Min Ho? Up there! Lee Min Ho! Lee Min Ho!
It's crazy, right? So bottom line is Korean exports work. If you're a multinational company thinking of expanding into Southeast Asia, I can tell you, okay, which celebrity to use as your launch celebrity. Okay. Yeah, they're expensive. I mean, the 11th Street guys were complaining as well. So, if you look at like all these factors, right? What's in existence at the moment is the fact that the digital economy in Southeast Asia 6, right, is still fairly low at the moment. What I used just now was e-commerce. And e-commerce in Southeast Asia, $6 billion, okay? Is that a lot or very little? It's very little, right? $6 billion e-commerce, B2C, okay, is less than 1% of total retail in Southeast Asia. Less than 1%. Like China is like what, over 20%. Korea, I'm sure it's a high number. But it goes to show like the amount of headroom and the massive opportunity there is in Southeast Asia, okay? And then travel and tourism. So travel and tourism came about earlier. It's predominantly driven by AirAsia. So AirAsia, when they started, they said, I'm not going to work with travel agents. If you want to fly with AirAsia, cheap tickets, reliable, connecting to a lot of different places in Asia, fly with us, and you can only book a ticket through my website. So they started in the late 90s, and that sort of like drove the whole digital travel economy, and it had a spillover effect on the rest of the other industries, predominantly e-commerce, right? Media and entertainment, so more and more people are moving towards what we call the OTT service, okay? Subscription-based, iFlix, Netflix, there are a lot of other sort of like competitors trying to tap into this market, right? The television players, the cable players are losing out, and they are pivoting their business to such services. Advertising as well. So advertising, I feel, is one of the slowest in this region to sort of like, move to the whole digital economy, but it's getting there, right? Google in Malaysia, for example, started up 6 years ago, and we are slowly seeing a lot of shift from the traditional medium, i.e. print, television advertising, billboard advertising, radio advertising, to more digital advertising. So that move is happening at the moment, right? And transportation. So you guys know of Uber. I know there's this service called Kakao Taxi, right? In Southeast Asia, the largest two is Gojek and Grab. Both of these players are unicorns, right, in Southeast Asia. And they are doing a great service. They're winning over Uber. And it's just a big plus for us as consumers in Southeast Asia, right? And lastly, gaming and social instant messaging is becoming more and more large, but there is very few local players, I feel, in Southeast Asia that is capturing all this intent, okay? So 2 billion on gaming is not a lot. If you think about like the whole industry where people pay for virtual currency, people pay to sort of like support their friends, right? $2 billion is nothing, right? And I feel that there is opportunity, obviously, to grow even further. And one of the main hindrance, which I will explain to you just now, is payments, okay? And so, we did this whole exercise with Temasek. I was at this Bain conference as well, Bain & Co. It's a consulting company. And we made like a 10-year prediction, right? 10-year prediction across all these industries. If everything fires, if there is like natural growth in terms of mobile penetration, if there is natural growth in terms of GDP per capita, right? And there is like sufficient funding, and we overcome like other challenges that I'll explain to you just now. All these industries sum up together will become a $200 billion opportunity. So from 37 to $200 billion in 1 decade or less. Okay, so it's tremendous. It's I'm going to use this word again, huge opportunity, right? And there's no reason why you guys shouldn't expand into Southeast Asia now. Okay, so I told you all the good news, right? So you must be wondering like, shit, I should do it now, right? But you might also sort of like ponder and say, why isn't there like a larger economy right now, right? Given the fact that there's 130% mobile connections as a percentage of the population, given the fact that a lot of people in Southeast Asia are spending a lot of time on their phones connected to the internet, the fact that there is a lot of digital buyers already, why isn't like the industries really taking off now? Okay. So you can see, okay, funding is essentially, I feel, one of the most important elements in growing the digital economy, right? So if you look at like US, India, China, a lot of the VCs around the world, the big ones, right, they recognize that these are huge countries. There is a lot of huge opportunity again in these countries, and I should invest. Southeast Asia, on the other hand, fairly complex at the moment, right? They speak different languages, different culture, 25,000 islands. It's very difficult to tackle, okay? Plus, there is also not enough good, innovative products, good talent in Southeast Asia that is really driving, that is acting as a bait, right, to VC monies coming into this region. Right? And just to give you some perspective, majority of the funding happens at the seed level, right? And you can see a huge taper off beyond Series A. And this is back to my point about execution, about quality of the product, innovation of the product. It's just not building an evergreen business that would disrupt the market. Hence, the VCs are not seeing that vision from startups in Southeast Asia, and they're not investing post Series A, right? And if you look at like deals by country, Singapore, when they invest in Singapore, is usually a regional play, like a Southeast Asia play, right? Hence, a lot of the money is actually channeled into Singapore. The next one that they're channeling into is Indonesia. So Indonesia alone, just Indonesia, they don't use Indonesia as a base for the whole region. They use Indonesia just for that 260 million people in Indonesia, right? They see a lot of like money flowing into Indonesia to really tackle the fundamental problems, right? That is, transportation, e-commerce marketplace, travel aggregator, and so on and so forth, right? But majority is very much centered around Singapore. Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, a few, but not enough. And you can see that a lot of the funds, right, the absolute volume is very much centered around 4 to 6 startups. 4 to 6 startups that really get it, 4 to 6 startups that really tap into a huge and scalable market in Southeast Asia, right? And majority of the funds come from the BAT, okay, from China, as well as the US, okay. So the monies that are pouring into Southeast Asia hugely concentrated on 4 to 6 startups, okay. So this is not a pretty picture, right? Even so, if you look at like this chart, right, you can see that you can in a way make a guess that there are 4 unicorns in the whole of Southeast Asia. 600 million population, 4 unicorns. In Korea alone, there's like 4 unicorns, right? And you guys are less than 1/10 of the population. So why is this the case, right? What is the challenge there? So this, by the way, is the highest mountain in Southeast Asia. It's called Puncak Jaya, right? So what is the challenging aspect of really succeeding in Southeast Asia, right? So number one, it's not a homogeneous market. There is no one single language that will conquer it all, okay? There is no one single religion that will conquer it all. In fact, if you look at like just 4 countries alone, right? Thailand, majority is Thai. Malaysia, 50% is Malay, okay? I am a Malaysian, but I'm Chinese ethnic, and I'm Buddhist. In Indonesia, is majority Indonesians, but there's a rich population in Chinese. And Singapore, 6 million people, majority Chinese, right? So when you talk about like ethnic origin, it's not one common ground. Although we're all Asians, right? Behaviors, celebrations, festivities, they're all different, okay? And religions obviously like driving all this as well. Thailand, majority Buddhist. Malaysia, majority Muslim. Indonesia, Muslim. Singapore, so on and so forth, right? And then we do have like multiple celebrations. So the good thing about like living in Malaysia is that I have over 20 days of public holiday, right? So the Muslim celebration that is coming up at the moment is called Eid or Hari Raya. I get 2 days off. Chinese New Year, I get like 2 days off. Christmas, I get 1 day. The Indian celebration, I get 1 day. So it's one of the big pluses of living in Malaysia. Singapore's the same as well. Singapore's a multinational country, and they enjoy such perks. And I spoke about languages. Here, again, I use Google search, right? I look at of all the searches that happen in these countries, what percentage of that is English, and what percentage of that is in their local language, right? So you can see in Thailand, 80% Thai. Indonesia, 75% in Bahasa Indonesia. And in Vietnam, it's 88% Vietnamese. Okay? So the importance of going local in these big markets is very, very important. And Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, thankfully, right, English does the job. In fact, if you look at Malaysia, 10% Malay, but majority of the Malaysians speak English. So having like your business translated in English works pretty well for Singapore, Malaysia, and Philippines. Not so much for Thailand, not so much for Indonesia, and definitely not for Vietnam. Okay. So I'll let you digest this chart for now. I just need to water my. So you talk about like this market's sort of like growing up, right? Becoming more sophisticated, on route to becoming like developed markets. One of the key factors that is sort of like hampering that rise is the fact that majority of the population, okay, in these major markets in Southeast Asia are not banked, right? So where do they keep their money? Under their bed, right? So it's a very Asian thing to do. You keep cash. You want to hold on to cash, right? And it's not to say that they're dodging taxes. They're not dodging taxes. It's just a very, very cash economy, okay? And there is still this sense of insecurity of putting money in a bank and using a credit card to pay for stuff, to do transactions, or even to accept payments, right? So there's this like that insecurity, okay? But I believe that this one will change drastically, right? Because of the fact that there's this rising millennials, the young population that is willing to, try new things, okay? And if you look at like, e-commerce payment methods, okay? Malaysia, Singapore, fairly advanced in Southeast Asia, okay? Credit card, debit card, Malaysia internet banking are the norm. Right? It's very, very common in Malaysia and Singapore. But if you look at like the other countries, right, cash on delivery. So this presents like a logistical nightmare, right? You imagine 25,000 islands, right? Majority of them are in Indonesia and Philippines. You find your way to deliver like a product to someone sitting in. So if let's say the fulfillment center is in Jakarta, and like someone in Bali buys from you, you deliver the product, and then it's, hey, if you don't accept cash, I won't buy from you. Fine, I will accept cash. But once they appear at the doorstep, they look at the product, it's like, oh, this is not what I want. I'm not going to buy it. What happens then, right? So India faced the same problem. India, cash on delivery is huge, but they somehow managed to solve it because it's one big country, it's one big island, right? And they were willing to invest in multiple fulfillment center and using like motorbikes to deliver items, right? So this still presents a huge problem, especially in the e-commerce space. And one of the reasons why it's not like a rocket ship in terms of the rising industry is because of the payment methods. Okay. Okay. I want to show you. So you spoke about like internet connectivity. A lot of people are using their mobile phones online and so on and so forth. I want to tell you a little story that happened 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago. I climb Bukansan, right? Climb all the way to the top, and I turn on my phone, and I saw internet, and I just decided to call my wife, and I wanted to speak to my son. So I was at the top of the mountain. Nothing else was there, right? And I managed to talk to my wife for like a minute. It's amazing. And this is Korea, right? It's amazing, right? Southeast Asia is not the same. It's extremely slow, okay, compared to Korea, and the coverage sucks. Coverage is really bad, right? That's why I say, like, Vietnam, for example, it's all Wi-Fi, right? A lot of all these like urban places, the cafes, the restaurants, all have Wi-Fi. Same thing with Thailand. And Malaysia, it's very much controlled by a few telcos or few providers, and they're not willing to innovate to give consumers faster internet speeds, right? It's still very much hampered by the fact that it's very much controlled by a few players. There's no incentive to sort of like give the consumers more bandwidth and faster speeds, right? So this presents a problem, right? But you see, the funny thing is, this is what, so I work very closely with a lot of different industries in Southeast Asia, right? And one thing that still sort of like makes me crazy or makes me mad, right, is the fact that they don't understand the basics of getting their mobile assets or their web assets right, okay? And I did this analysis, I did this test for companies that I work with, okay, based in Southeast Asia. And these are like huge travel players. They are like supposedly innovative telecommunication players. There's fintech, okay? There's online classifieds. There's even an e-commerce player, a couple of e-commerce player, 3 actually, and so on and so forth, right? These guys are still not getting it right in terms of their page load speed, okay? So this number is basically the time it takes to fully load a site in the same country, right? So if travel, one of them was AirAsia, it takes like 17.2 seconds to fully load its homepage. Means all the text firing, everything is preloaded, right? That's a long time. So it's very confusing, right? So internet speed is slow, coverage is not that amazing. The companies do not want to innovate, okay, or just do a simple fix to deliver a good customer experience. But what the customers want is really, really, really fast or good experience on mobile and their web pages, right? So this data, this analysis that we did across the world shows that consumers, if you give me a good experience, you give me a quick checkout process, I don't care which brand you are, I will more likely buy from you, right? So this to me shows that brand loyalty or brand awareness is second to the speed of your checkout on mobile, right? So in Southeast Asia particularly, is very, very important to get the speed right, okay? And I spoke about trust. There is still very low consumer sentiment when it comes to, I guess, transacting, okay, on the internet, right? You saw like high usage, huge connections, huge penetration, but when it comes to like one step further, like paying for games or purchasing an item, right, there is still that heavy resistance, okay? And that reason is because there is this inherent perception in Southeast Asia that a lot of the items that is sold in Southeast Asia are fraudulent items, okay? You can see this. This is from an online classified, right? And this is a Rolex Daytona. So for you guys who know like luxury watches, this watch is pretty expensive, right? And it's being sold for 5,000 pesos. That is $100 US. And it doesn't say that it's fake or anything like that, because the online classifieds do not allow for fake items to be sold, right? So, like in terms of like highest amount of fraudulent activities. Indonesia, number one, Southeast Asia. Malaysia is up there as well, and Philippines, right? So there's still this like resistance to do more online by the consumers in Southeast Asia, right? Despite the fact that a lot of them are well connected. So, you know, I've given you a summary of all the challenges. I've given you a summary of like the amazing opportunity that is Southeast Asia. I will share with you a couple of things that you know, you should do if you're thinking of like really expanding into Southeast Asia, right? So how do you actually, you know, how tips and tricks to climb that mountain, basically. Okay, number one, it's not a mobile app only economy. Okay, it's still very much a mobile web in Southeast Asia, right? And it's still growing very fast. So more and more people are coming online. Discoverability on mobile web in Southeast Asia, very high. Okay, loyal users will probably download the app, but mobile web is almost always the case, like driving majority of time spent, as well as transactions. Okay, and don't know whether you guys know this or have already been exposed to this. Google has a couple of solutions that is free, okay, that you guys should totally adopt if you're thinking of expanding in Southeast Asia. A couple of technologies that is progressive web app and accelerated mobile pages. So PWA and AMP. PWA is essentially allowing your mobile site to behave like a mobile app. Okay? So think about like no connection. You can still access your mobile site using PWA, right? You can also add like your particular page to the home screen through the browser. This is not app, by the way, this is mobile web, okay? And you can also give like notifications to your users without them downloading your app. So all that happens on mobile web. And this technology allows you to do such things. There's obviously more features to it, but if you want to find out more, Google Progressive Web App. Okay? And lastly, so on the topic of like, you know, faster is better than slower, accelerated mobile pages is essentially allowing your page to load instantly upon someone searching for a particular item. Okay, so you search, let's say, credit card comparison. And if you're Finda, for example, you appear, someone clicks on Finda, boom, automatically the page will load. Right? So this technology basically caches your website and allows like Google to serve the consumer faster when they search for relevant keywords. Okay? And we spoke about like the need to go local, right? But when I say mutant, it means that you don't really need to be innovative. You don't need like a groundbreaking product to really win in Southeast Asia, right? You need to understand what the local wants, and you develop like a hybrid solution for them, right? Let me explain Gojek. Who here knows about Gojek? 1, okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So I'll explain to the rest of the guys, right? So Gojek is essentially like Uber, but they are motorcycles. They started off as motorcycles, right? And they started off in Jakarta, in Indonesia. So who here has been to Jakarta? The traffic is crazy, right? Right? To get from point A to point B, which is like 2 km away, half an hour. I'm serious. I'm serious. Please go to Jakarta and try it out yourself. Right? So Gojek is actually an amazing solution for people who are visiting Jakarta, or even like people who are living in Jakarta. Right? Just whip out the app and then call the guy. The guy will rock up onto your street or hotel or wherever, and then he can take you to that like point B, 2 km away in like 2 minutes. Right? So Gojek did well. They focused a lot on such unique proposition, and as a result, they executed very well as well. And as a result, you know, in 1.5 years, they became a unicorn, right? That 1.5 years, that 18 months, they grew number of rides by 100 times, okay? They are bigger than Grab and bigger than Uber in Indonesia. So the need to sort of like understand the local nuances and deliver a solution that is not really groundbreaking, but a hybrid solution can make you win in countries in Southeast Asia, right? And then I'll talk about like NPS. So NPS is Net Promoter Score. It's essentially a measure of how well you're doing in terms of consumer satisfaction in that country, right? So I spoke about Grab, Gojek. Gojek is obviously favored in Indonesia. But when it comes to, let's say, like e-commerce, right? You might think that Amazon or AliExpress, they got it, right? They have all the experience from US, they have all the experience from China. They can come into this region and win. It's not the case, okay? Tokopedia and Lazada, for example, set up local shops. They set up local fulfillment and distribution centers. They even like hold inventory, right? So that they deliver faster to the consumers. They deliver a website that is local, and they deliver like a mobile experience that is much faster for the local market, right? People who are accessing your site, wanting to buy products using cheap phones. Okay, and I'll speak about iFlix, right? So it's a lot of people compare them with Netflix, right? They are a streaming service, but Netflix charges you like $10 a month. iFlix charges you $2, right? Why are they so cheap? And how can they win, right? They win by virtue of the fact that they have local content and they partner with big local players. For iFlix to expand into any market, right, they won't just build a team there and just start selling to everyone. They will always work with a telecommunications company and get the telecommunications company to sell for them, right? So like in Malaysia, for example, they work with all the telecommunication company and they say, look, you sell for me, okay? You sell to the consumers 100 ringgit or $100, and you take like 20%. That's fine. We're willing to break even or we're willing to make a loss as long as we get like subscribers on our platform, right? So it's not very much going against Netflix. Their strategy was going against what is one of the most popular activity in Southeast Asia, piracy and television, right? They went after piracy and they are going after television. They are saying that, look, a lot of people in their homes, they have television, okay? I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that with good content. I'm going to change that with on-demand content and cheap subscription base, okay? Their largest challenge is piracy. So a lot of people in Southeast Asia, they can view all sorts of things for free. And the government find it very difficult to regulate that, right? Because there's always like all these torrent sites, all this like popcorn time coming up. And what iFlix wants to do is to get on the good books of the government, and together they fight like piracy, right? So they're getting a lot of subsidy for that, and they're in a way winning the battle because the cost of subscribing to iFlix to try it out, right, and you get a really good experience is very low. And I spoke about partnerships. A lot of partnerships in Southeast Asia, right? It's sort of like between a traditional industry, a traditional company, and a new company. It's always the case of the new company, which is, in this case, an e-commerce marketplace, Lazada, wanting to tap into the user base of a bank. And the bank wants to tap into the sort of like the digital buyers that Lazada has, right? So such partnerships can really help each other scale, okay? So you might think, hey, look, these guys are big. Lazada is big. Maybank is the largest bank in Malaysia. It's huge, right? So how can I, as a startup, like, do this as well, right? So you think about like Spotify. So Spotify is not big in Southeast Asia, right? But as the telco, so Maxis is a telco, as they're moving towards more service-oriented revenue, they're willing to partner with, I wouldn't call Spotify a startup, but a new digital service that would help Maxis, the telcos in Southeast Asia, diversify their revenue, right? So the incentive is still there, the unique selling proposition is still there, right? And then lastly, I'll talk about like a startup and a large travel company. So Touristly is essentially a startup that helps you get tours and activities wherever you go in Asia, right? So they are, think about them as a booking.com and agoda.com of tours and activities, travel activities, okay? So what they did was they went to Tony Fernandez, who's the co-founder of AirAsia, and they pitched aggressively, right? And say that, look, my product complements your product. So let me help you, and you can help me, right? So they work very closely together. People who bought flights, and AirAsia owns like a hotel chain as well. People who bought hotels then booked travel activities or tours with Touristly. And this partnership became so awesome that AirAsia decided to buy over them, right? And AirAsia flies like 50 million passengers a year across Asia. Okay, and as you sort of like venture into Southeast Asia, right? We are a fairly small knit community when it comes to the startup space. When it comes to funding, you might see like a long list of like venture capitalists here, but there is essentially like a very, very small community of us that constantly set up events across different regions, within Southeast Asia, and also like help each other with partnerships, with business plans, with pitches, and so on and so forth, with introductions as well, right? So no matter who you are, Korean, Indonesian, Indian, American, Japanese, Southeast Asian people are very like inclusive, right? Friendly people. And lastly, so if you think about like expansion in Southeast Asia, don't think about like what you have that worked in South Korea, but Google's presence across all these markets is fairly strong, right? So when it comes to market share, Android and Google search, we are one of the largest, if not the largest, across many markets. And YouTube, I know it's a phenomenon in Korea, but it's also huge in Southeast Asia, right? That's it from me. So I'm just going to give you a summary, okay? Bottom line is huge opportunity in Southeast Asia. People in Southeast Asia, consumers, are young and they're very much connected, okay? And they are connected through smart, cheap phones, but they do have really, really high expectations. So they prefer like the site to load faster rather than slower, right? Despite the fact that a lot of these large e-commerce players, these large travel players do not give them that experience at the moment, but they require that, okay? So think about the opportunity, right? If you were to challenge like status quo in Southeast Asia and you deliver like a faster experience, a better product, there is a chance that you might win at the moment. A lot of headroom to grow across multiple industries, okay? From travel to gaming to media and entertainment. These industries will grow 3 to 10x in the next 10 years, okay? And cross-border is becoming the norm. People are searching for it. People are purchasing. But if you are able to deliver like a foreign product that they want, that is deployable easily in Southeast Asia, even better, right? And driving Korean products is a sure win. We obviously need more funds to fuel growth. So if you're a VC sitting somewhere and you feel like you don't know where to put your money, do explore Southeast Asia. There's obviously some challenges, like I mentioned just now. There's language barrier, there's cultural barrier. People are still not familiar with online payments, although there's a chance for all these alternative payments to come up and deliver solutions that make sense, right? Speed is an issue, internet speed is an issue, and consumer sentiment in terms of like trust is a big problem at the moment, okay? But you can definitely win, right? If you're fast, if you go local, you partner with the right partners, you leverage on the community that is very strong in Southeast Asia, and you obviously work with Google.